I just wanted to welcome you. I know some of you have not been to our new space, so we welcome you to come back when you can take a tour and visit and see the upstairs and all of that. But I know it's a full-packed agenda and we're a little bit behind schedule, just a little bit. But Tony, and you know, this is an event that was supposed to happen already, right?
Yes.
So we postponed it long enough. We don't want to do that again. And so I just welcome Tony to the front and thank you for being here and hope you get a lot out of it. Okay?
Good morning. I'm excited today. Well, we survived the polar vortex and we ended up here today, and now we can say go Bucks, right? So thank you so much for your participation today, your willingness to rearrange your schedule and your time to participate in today's conversation around evaluators of color and culturally responsive evaluation. I'm excited today because today's event really aligns itself really well with WPN and Wisconsin Philanthropy Network. We survey our members a lot, and I'm sorry about that, but I'm not so sorry about that. And if you go to your mailbox today, you'll probably see another survey on another subject. So, but we survey our members a lot and ask them what is important, ask them what issues are important, what spaces we need to be in for conversation, and how that aligns with WP and the work that we're trying to move forward to promote effective philanthropy in the state. And today's event falls squarely into some of that work. Our members are telling us that equity and inclusion are a very important component of the work that we want to work on. They want us to be thought leaders. In today's conversation will ideally elicit some thought with you. They want us to engage in great conversations and convenings. And they want us to draw off the expertise of those working in the field. And I think today's event and conversation will absolutely do that for us. I'm personally looking forward to today's discussion. Hopefully we'll challenge ourselves and we'll challenge each other. And we should feel free and authentic to be able to do that and engage in a real good and authentic conversation. And most importantly, hopefully we'll learn. We'll learn today. We'll learn some new things. We'll learn some new ideas. We'll learn some different perspectives. And we'll pull all of that out together. Today's conversation started exactly the way I love our conversations to start. Started in a coffee shop, having a conversation about philanthropy and its impact on evaluation. And it grew into today's event. So I'm really excited about that. And I want to thank our planning committee as well as the participants today. And I also really want to thank Beta Philanthropies for opening up your great space to us for today's event. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Maloney Takar, who's a board member with Milwaukee Evaluation, who will share some information about the day.
Good morning. Is everyone caffeinated and well fed? Yes, let's hope so. Let's hope so. So we do have a jam-packed day today, but I just wanted to go over a few things. As Tony mentioned, I'm on the board for Milwaukee Evaluation, and Nicole was my partner in crime in planning this event. So it's really great to see that it's finally come into fruition, because initially it was supposed to happen in January, and then it got postponed 3 months later. So in addition to working in research and evaluation for nearly 15 years, I'm also a daughter of immigrants. My mother immigrated from Malawi and my father immigrated from Tanzania. And actually my mother was, I was kicking in the womb when my mother immigrated to this country. And so I've spent a lot of time reflecting when doing this work of how I honor their legacy and all the sacrifices and risks they made in order to build a better life for me and my family. And that's one of the things I've always appreciated about the field of evaluation, because at its core, it's really about critical inquiry and critical reflection on what are the lessons and knowledge we can glean from the past as we build a better future for those who will come after us. And that's in essence why we intentionally named this briefing called Sankofa, which is an African saying that is in essence about looking and gleaning the wisdom and the knowledge from those that came before us, to look forward and build a future for those who will come after us. And the other thing that is significant is there's the symbol of this bird that you'll see at the top of the agenda. And if one thing you'll notice, you may not quite tell quite from the picture, but the feet are standing forward and the head is looking back. And so everything about this event was intentional, including its name. And so we ask that you, since you all made the great effort to come here, to use this space as a time to really engage in critical reflection and how we can, not only when it comes to the field of evaluation and how we can promote cultural responsive practices in the field of evaluation, but also as your work in philanthropy, how we can, as we continue to invest in our communities and support the communities, how can we build a better future for those that we serve. In regards to how the day will go out, we have a jam-packed day. There will be a scheduled coffee break, which will probably be very much needed later in the afternoon. And there also will be plenty of carved out time for questions and comments, both within the large group when we have the panel discussion, as well as at your tables. And so that's something to be mindful of. So as you're going through the day, feel free to take notes of any questions or comments or thoughts or insights that come to you, and then you can spend the time during that designated time to go through those questions and insights. Nicole, did you have anything to add? All right, so we're all ready to get started. I'm going to hand it over to Nicole, who is our board president, and she's going to provide an overview of what Milwaukee Evaluation does and talk a little bit more about culturally responsive evaluation.
Hello everyone. I want to start out with appreciation for the courage and values that Bader and Wisconsin Philanthropy Network shared throughout the planning of this event, and to also encourage you to take time to do some reflection and take notes and write your questions down. In front of you, you have folders, and within those folders you have some of my PowerPoint slides in the second tab there. I'm going to go through a lot. I probably have 60 minutes, or according to Maloney, 1 day's worth of content in 30 minutes that I'm going to share with you. So keep track of your questions and try to use the PowerPoint slides if that's helpful. But I'm going to go through a lot and probably really quickly. So my name is Nicole Robinson, and I also want to welcome you to my neighborhood. I grew up a few blocks away from here, born and raised in Milwaukee, and I found the nonprofit sector 20 years ago, and evaluation about 13, 14 years ago. And I started out as a teen, and this picture shows you my first data collection sheet. I had a lot of fun taking a 5-question survey and making it into 30 questions and choosing the font Comic Sans. And from that point forward, I knew that I would love data, and I used that to help train the volunteers. I used that to create a resource book, but didn't know that that's what it was. That was called something: evaluation, assessment, documentation, planning. So today you're going to learn more than what you ever wanted to know about evaluation. We'll try to make sure that we break down some of the terminology. We'll use evaluation, assessment, documentation pretty interchangeably. So after I went to school on the East Coast, I landed at an organization called Mosaica, and there I was cocooned in love. I was able to harness my evaluation skills and work in a strong values-based sector. But then this guy was born. He's not mine, I have a fur baby. This is my sister's child, my youngest nephew. And he joined them, my two other nephews, who refer to themselves as the Trinity or the Chaos Kids. My boss one day said in passing, "When are you gonna go back home? You know, are you gonna wait till his bar mitzvah?" And I decided I wanted to go back home and see them grow up. And came back in June to Wisconsin. Actually came back in December. And I came back, and just this last month I was able to celebrate my nephew's bar mitzvah. And the Chaos Kids are much older. And who regularly volunteer for Milwaukee evaluation. So when I came back, I also came back to, this is WTF, it's not showing up, but I came back to Milwaukee and saw that things had gotten worse. Folks were poorer, the city had decayed, there were so many boarded up homes and homes missing, almost like someone had come in and just taken them overnight. And that was, I wasn't sure whether it was because I wasn't aware or whether things actually got worse. And those who stayed said, yeah, things are worse here. And what was even more particularly troubling was that my father was in this job line. This line started at 6 a.m. and went around the corner, down the block, and was filled to capacity more than an hour before the job fair would even open. There were over 1,000 people who were in line for less than 40 jobs. And my father was permanently displaced from this point forward. So it wasn't just the inequality. When I came back as an evaluator and I met few people who looked like me who were practicing evaluation, right? So it wasn't just the inequality. I was regularly mistaken for the intern, confused about being a researcher and evaluator. I was regularly in all white spaces, even though we were talking about black and brown people, people of color. Code switching was mandatory and celebrated, and I had not had that skill before. And I felt that people of color were always in precarious situations, that they could easily be uninvited to a meeting or discouraged. And there were certain lines of inquiry that were predictably discouraged, ignored, or rejected, especially if you mentioned race, especially if you want to talk about racism or the sources of inequality. That would suck all the air out of a meeting really, really fast. And then you learn that what Black feminist Christy Dotson tells us that in Testimony Smothering, that a lot of people truncate their own testimony because the audience has demonstrated that they're not competent to hear it. So when we say, oh, I'm going to meet them where they're at, oh, I'm going to appeal to their self-interest, we automatically start giving up our power. And that was the practice when I came here. And Christy Dotson also has blessed us with testimonial quieting. And that's when the audience fails to identify the speaker as a knower. Many of you have probably heard community residents say, it's only until someone with a PhD or letters after their name that then policymakers and leaders will make a difference. And so that was the practice. And I love the work of Christy Dotson and others who name and give us language to talk about these experiences. So what's happening? Why did I experience this in Wisconsin? Why weren't folks doing anything about it? Because I gained 20 pounds trying to code switch and learn what that was. And white supremacy is the answer. You have this slide in your booklets. White supremacy. It doesn't even feel good to say it out loud. It's just like, oh God. All of the work that you are doing is informed by white supremacy. Sit with that for a little bit. Many of you do not think of yourselves as white supremacists. But in fact, your practices are upholding white supremacy in very real ways with very real consequences for my community. It's in this room. It's in the new renovation in this room. It's in the money and tech policies that allow you to give out your grants. It's in that intersection, if you came through it with 7 lanes, that the elders in our community say is a Native American trading zone. It's why I-94 went through the Black Business District and displaced my parents. Lucky for me, they met and had me and my sisters, so there was a plus side to that displacement. But it's here, and it's in our work. And what I found was that evaluators weren't productively addressing this. And if you're not addressing it, then you're perpetuating it, you're reinforcing it, you're reproducing it. What happened in 2011, the American Evaluation Association, which is essentially like our parent group, came out with a cultural competence statement, and that provided the space for us to address white supremacy. Check it out, the entire conference was dedicated to values and valuing, and you have the AEA competencies in your booklet. So, but what are the specific problems, right? So why do we need something called culturally responsive evaluation? And just to note about CRE, I can't give you a checklist as to what it is and what it is not. It's something we don't have. But I can tell you that it's culturally responsive evaluation is culturally responsive, that it's affirming, that it's sustaining, and it's related to a lot of different forms of inquiry, feminist, transformative, emancipatory. And those are terms that you can use to learn about and include in your practice. But I can't give you a checklist, but I do want to demonstrate the value of it throughout my presentation today, and the panelists will also share their work. Participatory is not enough. I do want to flag that. If you've got a participatory approach, that is not enough. Embedding social justice and really working to undermine white supremacy is what's needed. So the first challenge that we have in the state is that we don't have evaluators of color or other underrepresented groups like Spanish-speaking, LGBT, youth, rural. When you get to northern Wisconsin, there's like 1 per 50,000 people, and anyone from Green Bay or up north will tell you that it is very hard to find an evaluator up north in rural areas. When we first started out, we had a list of 13. It's grown to 30 or 40 in the state. When we first started out, we heard evaluation firms doing national searches to find entry-level evaluators because they couldn't hire someone from Wisconsin. And unfortunately, when we first started out, we lost 2 Spanish-speaking Latina evaluators to California. So we have a very, very influx community. At our first meeting, what happens when you don't have evaluators of color? You have limited representation on the evaluation team, which influences what questions get asked and what gets looked at. So we ask people evaluators to look at their teams. And of the evaluation team of who's represented, how many are white, how many are LGBT, how many are Black, Latino, and then of the populations being evaluated, what's the ratio? Imagine what they found. That pretty much the teams were white, that they lived outside the community, compared to who was part of, at least the target of the evaluation or the beneficiaries of the program and the intervention. This is a simple thing that you can do right now in thinking about who is responsible for your assessment activities. So our response, when we got into this work, was to establish a pipeline of color, raise awareness of the issue, and make this part of other firms' objectives. And so what we've seen as a part of raising awareness is that we've seen evaluation firms get started and led. We have Ubuntu with Monique Lisson and our colleague here. We've seen the hiring of interns. We've seen successors of color identified. And what we try to do is just support this career and support young ones getting into it and leadership opportunities. We also try to highlight the beautiful work that's already happening in the state. Wisconsin Voices a couple years ago had a beautiful fellowship program that was designed to bring Hmong, Cambodian, Black, and Latina data managers into these organizations. And they were doing some raw stuff, man. In this fellowship, they were gearing up for randomized control. So we're talking serious data. And once they completed the fellowship, be able to take on senior positions. And now that work continues in terms of promoting an anti-oppressive lens to data. So this work is happening in the state and it's happening across the country. So we love to promote examples of this. So my first call to action to you is in line with national funders to review your job or RFP advertising and marketing to ensure a large number of practitioners of color are reached, to create an applicant assessment process that ensures a diverse interview pool, and to value lived experiences. And on this slide, you have some example language that you can pull from, and in your notebook, you have a sample RFP from the Colorado Trust Fund, which is the best damn RFP I've ever seen for recruiting an evaluation team that's representative of the community. So if you're like, well, how does my RFP actually change? Look at the Colorado example and really study it for the nuances and the differences. So, but inclusion is not enough. Evaluators of color are the lowest paid on the team. They're interns, they're assistants. They're often the face of the evaluation to the community and that they're the translator, but they don't design the evaluation. They're not the most powerful evaluator on the team. They don't interface with decision makers, that includes funders or policymakers. Through internalized oppression or workplace culture, they use a white person's worldview or white methods. I'm going to talk about white methods in a couple of slides, but essentially I'm saying they're tokens, and they readily accept the token identity, right? They experience gendered and racialized workplace trauma. So when you start speaking up, there's violence that happens when you're shunned and other discrimination that occurs. And then they're often discouraged and passed over for promotion. So it's not enough to have them at the table. Once they're in the room, lots of things start happening. And so to learn more about this, we've been implementing focus groups and interviews to understand what type of workplace trauma evaluators are experiencing. And it is rough, and it's part of why we can't retain evaluators of color in this state. Once they walk through the door, we have to be able to keep them in the door. So my second call to action is to examine your foundation's evaluation work culture for white supremacy and ask your grantees to do similar work. Vet the evaluator research portfolio for an authentic anti-oppression lens and don't hire evaluators who lack in-depth substantive experience in this area. Reward advanced level CRE expertise. In your packet, you actually have a 2 or 3 page document that talks about white supremacy culture and how it shows up in the workplace. And you can see beautiful examples and get some language. And then take a look at, is this in my foundation? Is this the culture that's in my grantees organization? And then when you hire evaluators, look for an authentic application of this lens, an anti-oppressive lens. So what I also noticed when I came back to Milwaukee is that evaluators were being offered capacity building, but it was in the areas of like logic model development or focus groups, like concepts from the 1950s, and not designed to address cutting edge issues. And so as a result, evaluators weren't challenging white supremacy or racism. They couldn't discuss it productively. And then, because there weren't politically relevant capacity building opportunities, the field just pretty much stayed that way. No one was prepared to discuss it. So what we've tried to do is offer capacity building opportunities that are liberatory, that are emancipatory. And an example here is that we did with African fellows from 25 different countries. We talked about how corruption is affecting evaluation and assessment. We talked about capitalism and white savior complex. And we could have gone all day in that event. We also hold webinars. We held one on evaluation and racism. That was one of the first ones we held. And folks from Israel, China, Argentina were trying to get on. Kentucky prosecutors called us and said, racism still exists and we gotta learn how to embed it, understanding of it, not just on the program side, but on the evaluation side. And it was so popular, but for the worst reasons, because what's happening at the time that we're holding these webinars is you have unarmed black men being killed by police. And so Baltimore, where Freddie Gray was killed, they were on the webinar trying to figure out what can they do to address equity. So this session talked about how racism shows up, but there are other resources. The one I want to point to is the white logic, white methods. We do offer stat sessions, right? But we're not there yet, but we want to be able to offer a retreat or something on anti-racism statistics, because there's some beautiful solutions to identify the causes of racial disparities that once you get out of school, it's really hard to keep up with. And so our hope is that we're able to offer those types of capacity building opportunities. And this slide makes me so excited because he is presenting a formula and a solution to be able to drill down into why race is a predictor for the different outcomes. So we all do lots of work, partner with different folks, but our flagship program is the Social Justice and Evaluation Conference. We offer it every other year. We offered it just a month ago, and that was our largest session with 200 people, and it's really a space for solidarity. It's really a space to work on critical consciousness and capacity building for evaluators. It's a space to be reaffirmed and energized, and it's different flavor. It's basically a party around data. We get to work on decolonizing outcomes, and this is just a sample of our presenters. So my third call to action that you can do without changing any institutional policy is to require the methods section of the researcher or the evaluator that you're working with to address evaluator bias, positionality, cultural responsiveness. And if they submit a methods section that doesn't include all that information, it talks about how they got the survey, it talks about how they did the interview, but if they don't submit a report that includes this in their methodology, kick it back. Because that lets you know that there was some lack of intentionality or something happening, and that you're interested in knowing what they're doing to learn about the community that they're engaging with. And then we also ask you to ask the evaluator to call out what is oppressive and exploitive in the programs you fund, not to punish the groups, but to help them learn and correct. And you have a beautiful article about how evaluators are not calling out racist policies, not calling out racist programs. All right, so one of the ways that I speak is on tangents, and if you come to one of our board meetings, my tangents have tangents. So I can imagine in the future when I'm talking to my nephews and talking about something called a phone book, and how we all used to share one phone, and how it was in a hole in the hallway that, they just want to talk about spring break and Mars, it's going to be like that. So we're going to go on a major detour. Just a quick review. So I'm arguing that in Wisconsin, white supremacy shows up in our programs. It has to show up in the evaluation too, right? Just the same way we want equity to show up in the programs, equity has to show up in the evaluation too, right? And I'm also saying that the scientific method, no matter what we believe about its objectivity, that it's systematic data collection, that does not erase white supremacy. That is not enough. Participatory, not enough. My next argument that I'm going to introduce and give you examples is that some of our favorite terms in evaluation and in the funding world are in fact tools for white supremacy. Your favorite tool, collective impact, white supremacy. Practice-informed, evidence-based, white supremacy. Data-driven, white supremacy. Those terms, evidence-based, data-driven, were supposed to be like beautiful tools that make us smarter, use our resources wisely, but then we're going to learn a little bit differently. So I'm going to give you 3 non-examples, so you can all rest assured I'm not going to talk about your work or your grantees. The examples I'm going to share with you are really, hopefully really clear and helpful. So the first one is Bartley. Bartley describes a funder-driven outcomes awarded through collective impact grants that were just a mechanism for corporations to stop environmental policies they didn't want. So the graph here shows, over a 10-year period, millions of dollars were invested in this particular collective impact grants, and really starting at 1994, when major foundations started investing in this work. And you can imagine the evaluators being very excited about the fact that you've got cross-sector work happening, that you've got corporations and nonprofits and government entities working together to work on an important issue. And Bartley then says, well, really it was just a distraction so that the grassroots groups wouldn't be effective. And that was the design all along, to look like they were working on environmental policy, but in fact, halt environmental progress. It's a really important case study. I won't do it justice, but hopefully it piques your interest. In the second example, I was in Puerto Rico at a conference, and the advocates were saying, oh man, trauma-informed care has been co-opted. And the reason they said is because trauma-informed care started out as, emphasizing state violence, structural violence. So violence caused by police, violence caused by racism, discrimination. And now it's interpersonal. It's more of, shootings, interpersonal violence, sexual assault, domestic violence. And so they're really upset. And as an evaluator, I'm seeing trauma-informed care, I'm even seeing trauma-informed evaluation sparking. So my argument here is that the influx of financial support for trauma-informed care and its use in mainstream culture, even the onset of the style of evaluation called trauma-informed evaluation, recreates racial hierarchy narratives and supports paternalism. Paternalism is also defined in your packet. And my argument is, you can see it better in the continuum at the bottom. As we think about the other, the group most impacted by your programs, by the interventions. If you think of Native Americans in the early days of this country, slavery, the other is not human, so the practices used are dehumanizing. Then we have to admit that Black people are in fact human, but we start in the early 1900s saying that they're immoral and criminal. So the white person's role is, I'm their keeper. And with trauma-informed care, we see something really interesting. The other is sick. Something happened to them, traumatized them, their genes are changing, they're agitated, and so then I become the benevolent savior. And I see a lot of savior themes in neighborhood improvement programs, economic development programs, and it's used in the methodology so that the evaluator then collects data and metrics that value the savior trope. My last example, if you've been following what's happening in Chicago, is around a data-driven gang database that's now being eliminated for its role in unconstitutional data-driven surveillance and criminalization. Essentially, the Inspector General came out with her 164-page report that said, the data in this database is unreliable. All you needed to do to be a gang member was post something on social media, be stopped in a neighborhood, have a tattoo, or just know someone. And so there were 100-year-old people in this database. There were 11-year-olds in this database. And what happened is, if you were in front of a judge, you got an amplification in your sentence or in your fine because you were a known gang member. In their review, they essentially found some of the descriptors said, well, what makes them a dangerous element? One of the descriptors included Black. So this is all in the news. The groups, which include University of Chicago, have already linked this database system to white supremacy. And in fact, they have said that not only is it unreliable, but they are also questioning why 1 million people used it in 10 years. There were 1 million inquiries in 10 years, and 500 different entities, including Wisconsin entities, used this database. And they describe it as data-driven criminalization, that we are collecting data to surveil people and to criminalize them. But this database was used, and so my questions are, who funded this data-driven database? Which social scientists, researchers, data analysts, and evaluators use the database, and which university institutional review boards approve the use of the database as a source of data, given that it's unconstitutional? Chicago Police Department's response is to create a new database called the Criminal Enterprise Database. So my last call to action is have your grantees rigorously assess their stated outcomes and methodologies for perpetuating inequality and oppressive narratives and structures, and then alter those outcomes that are found to be inconsistent with social justice. Mock evaluation is a critique to the evaluation happening in the state. It is a critique to the work that the academics, the nonprofit, the for-profit evaluators were doing and are doing. Everyone is implicated, those of us in the room, those of us outside the room, but we are all responsible for the communities we serve, and we can do something about it. And that's a lot of the work that we've been doing. We did a recent survey that reminds us that it's all about power and money. The same folks are getting the same grants or contracts and conduct evaluations in the same way. So it isn't rocket science why some of the same chronic outcomes and poor quality of life have not changed. Evaluation and research studies need to be built differently by different people. If we keep producing basically the same monolithic group of academics, how will things ever change? This is embedded in the systems and institutions of education, policy, procurement, political, and monetary practices. So we're more reminded that we've got to switch things up. And we operate from a place of social justice, and we use UC Berkeley's definition of social justice. This last point empowers all people to exercise self-determination and realize their full potential. We think of empower as shifting power, transferring power, right? Not giving power. And when we think about our work, we are, we end up loving our work because we put people of color at the center of our strategy development. If I had imagined you with just white bodies, with just white logic, as white supremacists, perhaps I would think of presenting you with different topics. But I'm thinking of you as someone who's serious about social justice. And I'm thinking if I were in a room with people of color who are awake, these are the kinds of things that I would want to talk about. So it guides everything we do, and it guides all of the values and things that we make. So after everything that you've heard today, we have one fear, and that is that culturally responsive evaluation, social justice, will become the new buzz term in your work and appropriated, watered down, where tokenism is awarded. But it is our job to give you bright line definitions and clarifications of what counts and what doesn't count. This is the board. We are, again, the Wisconsin chapter of the American Evaluation Association, and we are sisters to 30 other AEA affiliates. We're also a member of the IOCE, which is basically the United Nations of Evaluation, and we were the first American group to, local affiliate to be registered with them. AEA's presidential rotation team basically means the president-elect, current president, past president, as well as our new executive director, Anisha Lewis, had these really kind remarks to say about our work. And we've actually seen Michigan, New Mexico also implement social justice and evaluation at conferences. And we're loving what Hawaii is doing, educating their indigenous evaluators, and they come in full force. There'll be like 30 of them in a room. It's like, dang, one day I want that for our state too. With that, thank you.